someone who's only been sanctioned once, I feel a little bit in the shadow. But I am trying. Can I say, first of all, this is a phenomenal report. And as ever, with all the work that you've been doing over the years to support those poor people in Hong Kong who have had their rights and their human rights taken away from them, and the legal system which they came to rely on has been debauched. So my thanks to you, and I wanted to give you one more round of applause for the phenomenal work. There is so much detail and so much of what you said that stands as very specific points. I want to make a few very quick points about why I think this is now the issue of our age, and the one that we will be measured against in generations to come for the tests that we stood up to or we failed. I happen to think now that the nexus between China, huge, but about to take over as the world's largest economy perhaps, certainly has plans, as President Xi has made clear, to become the world's most potent and largest military, and Russia, two states that abuse the rule of law, do not believe in human rights, and think nothing of taking away people's liberty without trial or without reason. These are two nations. It once used to be the case that Russia was in the lead and that China followed. That is no longer the case. China is in the lead and Russia follows. And the point here about this is I think the trouble with all of us and with business is that business can think only of the bottom line. And I don't, in some cases blame businesses for worrying and for focusing on that. But the truth is there is a wider concept when you're dealing with autocracies that you have to bear in mind. It's fine if you're in the free world, dealing and investing in the free world, where the rule of law stands and where justice has very clear definition. Then of course you are freer to look at these. But when you move to invest in an autocratic regime that demonstrably cares nothing for its own citizens and debauches their rights and the rights of those that are involved with them, then you really have to do so with your eyes wide open. And I'm afraid what this report points out, and what I've long believed, that big name businesses and banks have done so deliberately, hiding from the reality of how their money, their investment, yields return. And the point here is that if you think about it, how many more signals do we need to be sent? China invades the South China Seas. The UN tells it has no right to be there, it has no historic right, and that it should vacate. But far from that, it is now militarizing the South China Seas. Vietnam has as many more rights in a way. Philippines, these other countries all look on in horror as China seeks resources in an area that it has no absolute international rights. It has now trashed the Sino-British Agreement in Hong Kong, an agreement that we believe stood as an international treaty. Remember during the Brexit debates how the hue and cry in this country about the possibility that we were going to renege on what everyone thought was an international treaty obligation. Oh, my goodness gracious me. But when China does it, it's very quiet indeed. China has taken away the rights that we thought were their right in Hong Kong and is now locking up peaceful activists who've done nothing more than campaign for the very thing that we think underpins our lives. Shame on them and shame on us for failing to raise this again and again and again, and for businesses to turning a blind eye. Which brings me to the final point I want to make. There is a wider issue here with China. I believe that China is deliberately debauching the financial rules-based order of the world and the trading rules-based order as well. Currency manipulations and absolute abuse, as was pointed out earlier on, is actually undermining the very nature of how we trade with each other. The WTO, which insists that it's a developing nation still and therefore doesn't have to abide by all of the rules of the WTO. What does the WTO do about that? Next to nothing. When the WHO asks whether or not this problem they've got in Wuhan is a problem they should be concerned about, China lies through its teeth and pretends that there was nothing wrong. It didn't tell the WHO deliberately until the end of December, while it shut down the Wuhan laboratory and destroyed all the records that existed there. The result of that behavior, not abiding by international obligations and rules, is that tens of millions of people around the world have died. They have died deliberately because it broke all of the agreements that we have, all of us, to make sure that we deal with these kind of things immediately and we own up to the problems. They didn't do that. They are exempt, it appears, from all of these rules. And this brings me to the last bit. I actually think we are revisiting history right now. I set up with some others IPAC, the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China. We have 2 co-chairs in every country, left and right. We now cover 21 countries. India joined 3 days ago, at last, thank goodness. From Japan to America, they are all concerned about China and its behavior. And they want our governments to step up and recognize that we now need to talk seriously about ending the dependence that we have grown to have on China, this autocratic regime that abuses people's rights. Now here's the point. When a despot tells you what they are about to do, the trouble with the free world is we tend to reinterpret that and believe that that's not going to happen. In the 1930s, we kept on reinterpreting what Adolf Hitler kept telling us about what he and Germany were about to do. Whether it was reoccupation of the Rhineland, whether it was Anschluss, whether it was the ambitions in the Sudetenland and subsequently what was then Czechoslovakia. Each time he made the clear statement, each time we backed away. Industry didn't want to know because they found investing in Germany was a very profitable exercise. And if I tell you where industry ended up, when the tanks finally rolled into Poland and war was declared, the precursor of the CBI was busy at a conference with their Reich group that was their same representative in Berlin. And war was publicly declared, and they sent a telegram back to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to say, we don't think we need to leave yet. We'd like to complete the meeting, which it has great benefits for us in the future. The Foreign Office said, return home now, we are at war. We do not wish to reach that. But what we are doing, as they did then, is failing to listen to what we are being told by the very people who then do it. We are at that moment where we have to make a decision. Do we as free world nations and as leaders of governments insist now that our businesses start to move their investments elsewhere and that we stand up against this ghastly despotic regime so that it doesn't end up as it ended up in 1939 with some 60 million dying? We have to end this. We have the tools. They need our investment. They need our money. We now need to make some very serious demands and end this. This is the critical moment. For our generation, this is the moment when either we stand up and account it, or we go quiet and let the worst thing happen.
Yeah, yeah.